Good morning, everyone. My name is Shane Yant, and I am the president of Competitive Solutions. For 30 plus years, my firm has been an industry leader in leadership development, employee engagement, and business intelligence solutions. And today, I get the privilege of sitting down with industry leaders to talk about the challenges that they're facing in 2024 and beyond. I hope you'll join us for a very exciting conversation. Thank you very much. Well, hello, everyone. I am delighted to be here with each of you today. For context, we are at the 2023 North American HR Executive Summit in Orlando, sponsored by Executive Platforms. And I am delighted to be able to be at the same table with each of you because we have just a very great level of experience as well as some history that we can share today around some really important topics that the HR organization is facing. And so just very quickly, a little bit of who we are. So my name is Shane. I lead a global transformation company, software company, leadership development company called Competitive Solutions. We are headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm also joined by Rob. Rob, you are an executive with NAHRES. I'm joined by Janae, who is an executive with Dollar General, and I'm joined by Sarah, who is an executive with Boeing. All right? And many of us at the table today, we specialize in the space of human development and engagement and culture and diversity. And that really is the topic of conversation that I would love us to have over the next few minutes together. For the group at home that is listening to this, at this conference, we surveyed folks who were attending, and we got over 700 responses of critical topics facing industry today. Some of those critical topics were employee and talent retention, talent attraction, recruiting and hiring, D&I initiatives, employee engagement, leadership development, and many others. And I would love over the next few minutes that we could have a conversation around what Boeing and Dollar General and Novartis are doing to really try to drive an awareness and an appreciation, and really more importantly, sustainability in those themes and those conversations. So one thing that I recently read was 10,000 baby boomers a day are retiring, and many of those are in leadership ranks. So I think it's an important place for us to start of how are we creating within our organizations a leadership pipeline where we're developing our leaders, but we're also encouraging them to stay and help be part of the future of our enterprise. Sarah, what's Boeing doing in this space?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. I'm happy to answer because this year our main focus within our organization has been on learning and development. It's been about building capability in our future leaders. So we've completely revamped all of our L&D offerings this year. We've stood up 3 new leadership development courses at senior levels, kind of mid-levels, and more entry-level leadership to really create experiential learning that exposes them to all parts of the business. So we're really hopeful that this will, instill in them both the understanding of what it takes, but also the capability and the know-how to grow into those future leaders. And then I think generally too, really instilling that sense of purpose in our leaders, the sense of connection, and the sense of what they do really matters. That's what keeps people around. That's what keeps people wanting to do more and accessing that discretionary effort that's within all of us.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a great answer. Yeah, that connecting people
Yeah.
to something bigger than personality or to the mission, to the purpose, to the future is so
Yes.
powerful, particularly as we talk today in the sessions about a remote workforce and being intentional about how we connect them. How about at Novartis, Rob? Your leadership development focus or journey, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar theme. Interesting. And I think this is such a relevant issue for all of us, right? That many companies are really looking at how do we develop our leaders for the present? Are they ready today for their next role and for the longer term future? And we just launched a new program this year that we call My Potential. Mm-hmm. For the more senior leaders of the company, we dig very, very deep with a partner that we have that really helps them assess their potential for not just today, but for the future with very, very meaningful conversations that culminate with meeting not just with the manager, but the manager's manager. But where are you going to be 2 steps from now? Yeah. So that people have the foresight, have the knowledge of where their role could be in the company. And it ties back to something you were alluding to, is that everyone wants to know that what they do makes an impact. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So is the impact that I'm making relevant? Is it relevant for the company? Is it relevant for my manager? Does the company care that I'm here? And the answer to that, of course, is yes, yes and yes. So I think it's an area that we all have to continue to really focus and do. I had a discussion with one of our senior leaders a while ago who had no idea where he stood in the company because no one ever told him. And I was talking to him and I said, this is what we're visioning for you. And he goes, Rob, no one ever told me that. And he goes, I have this whole new sense of purpose now of why that I'm here. And I had a few conversations about why he didn't know where he stood with the company.
Right,
That was a different
right.
internal
Yeah.
discussion. But that one conversation of I really know now made all the difference in the world.
Yeah, do our emerging leaders know how valuable they are and how important they are and how they're the future? John A., I love the story of Dollar General because, as we said at the panel, Boeing, a long-term aerospace entity and enterprise, Novartis, a huge player in biotech and pharmas. But when we look at Dollar General, the growth that you all have had as an enterprise is spectacular. In fact, they're everywhere, right? How have you kept up with that growth from a leadership development, employee engagement perspective?
So for us, it starts with a lot of the same things that Sarah talked about. It's the learning journeys is what we call them. We have 13 different learning journeys that are happening at any particular time. So what I need for my most senior leaders to do is very different than what I need for my frontline leaders to do. And it's our inclusion learning journey, and the reason why we call it a journey is because it's not a destination that we ever arrive at. And then we are intentional about how we connect talent. So what I mean is, if you're an officer at Dollar General, it's non-negotiable that you are a D&I ambassador. And every officer is responsible for 3 different things. Number 1 is what we call develop to lead. Number 2 is leadership on the move. And number 3 is good faith efforts. And we measure them because all of us know what gets measured is what gets done. With develop to lead, we're intentional to connect our underrepresented talent up with our most senior leaders. So the way we do that is we have 3 different verticals. There is our store support center, our retail side of the house, and then our supply chain side of the house. So our most senior leaders on the supply chain side of the house are responsible for sponsorship for an entire year, but it can't be anyone that's in your vertical. Our most senior leaders at store support center, same thing, and the same thing for retail. So what we literally do is take folks at the director level, and for us, it was the differentiator of sponsorship versus mentorship versus advocacy. And we kind of baked into our nomenclature that advocacy, anyone at any particular time can advocate, and in fact you should, for others. So if Sarah and I have a very good meeting today, then I might reach out to her leader and go, hey, I just wanted you to know Sarah really crushed it today and learned a lot from her, right?
Appreciate that, John A.
That goes across companies.
That's the advocacy part. And then mentorship, what we found is the onus of the quality of those relationships often lives with the mentee. So, it's, okay, I'm mentoring you. What do you want to know? Leader is responsible through the lens of the 3 E's, education, experience, and exposure. Underrepresented talent is now linked to you that wouldn't be in your vertical, that you wouldn't necessarily have an organic relationship with. And then we just go from there in terms of that's develop to lead, and that's the work that we do to make sure that we are infusing leadership development just in our DNA.
That is fantastic. The conversation we've had so far around leadership development, around D&I progress and initiatives really speaks to culture. And I know, Rob, you're very passionate about culture. I heard your presentation this morning, and you had a quote, and it was from the lady from Duke, being a North Carolina, Chapel Hill guy. I don't particularly appreciate that, but I would say to you, I really appreciated her quote in that, and I won't say it exactly, you'll do better than I, but create the culture you want because you're going to have one regardless, right? Would you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, and you summarized it very well. It's Sani Insane at Duke, and she's an expert on culture and leadership, and her perspective is a company has a culture, whether you like it or not. The question is, do you want to intentionally shape that, or do you want to just let it be? And so we've been on a very intentional journey now for many, many years of trying to define what that intentional culture is for our company. I can't transport my culture to Boeing or Dollar General to Novartis. Your culture is what you have. And it's a million moments that come together over the course of a day or a week or a month that actually make your culture. So the question is, how do you actually shape that? And what's really interesting, going back to your leadership discussion, is that the impact that the leaders have on shaping that is disproportionate to anybody else in the
Yeah.
company. And so if your leaders aren't shaping that very intentionally at all levels of the company, your culture won't move. Your culture journey will stagnate. And so that's the piece that we spend a lot of energy on, is how do you actually move that forward through intent, the how, more than the what, actually.
Because we're going to have one regardless, and it's the one we want.
Yeah.
Right. Great comments. You know, we also saw from the input from the attendees at the conference a lot around talent attraction, onboarding, making that experience such that at the end of their first day, they said, I made a good decision. How have you all influenced that? Or is there anything specific that you would like to talk about at Novartis or Dollar General or Boeing on what you're doing to create that experience day one so that those folks say, I've made the right decision?
They both look at me. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a really great question, and I don't think we have nailed it yet. I will say that. And I do think COVID set us back, because during COVID, we were hiring people remotely, we were onboarding them remotely, and then they sat remote for a long time before they actually got to interact with other human beings. But we know that that first day matters so much. We know that the first 3 months, you know, a person decides really whether they're in or they're out in those first 3 months. So it really is important. You know, from my lens, what I try to do is make sure that everyone who comes to join our great company knows that we chose them because they are great, because we see something in them that we value, that matters to us, and we want them to be able to deliver their best. And so it can be things like inspiring them about the mission and purpose of the company, right? When we attach to that, we're unstoppable. It can be about recognizing all the identities that come forward through self-ID, right? It's not just your standard 1970s self-ID. We've got lots of options now. Tell us who you are, because we want to meet you where you are and support you in all the ways that you need to be supported. And then sharing with them early the kind of opportunities that are going to be available to them at the company, especially for early career folks. They come in as an entry level, they come in as a level 1 engineer. They want to know what's possible. They want to know that they can grow their careers, that they will have those opportunities, not only for themselves to grow, but to really leave their impact and their legacy with the company and the world.
I love that point of you're joining a great company because you're great. And I don't think we say that enough in those first days or weeks. I often say the two most important days of our career are our first day and our last day. And I stand amazed at 30 years of helping organizations how badly we often do the first day and the last day for folks. And in this war for talent and the great resignation and the post-pandemic hangover, we've got to get better at that. And I think messaging that you're joining a great company because you're great.
And
is a great way
we
to
picked
start.
each other.
Yeah.
You picked us and we picked you. We're here together because we want to be. And I think
Right.
that's something that is always worth acknowledging. We just completed refreshing our entire employer value proposition, which we hadn't done in a couple of years, and we've been evolving as a company. We doubled down on some of our culture work to say, okay, even people who are here, why are they really here? And did a huge book of work that then we translated back into our employer value proposition, because we want to attract the same types of people with the same sense of purpose to come to the company, people that are already here, because that's how you fit in well, right? And so it's been an interesting journey with the intent of trying to refresh that, but also give us a lot of insight internally of what is really making people click, who are clicking really, really well. So it's been very insightful,
fantastic.
actually.
Yeah, similar to what Rob did, we just did our EVP as well. And we really did it through the design filter of nothing about me without me. And so we really, really asked employees, like, what is it that you would like to see in terms of the EVP? And then what we did was we pulled a thread through on day one to leverage our ERGs. Because to your point, you already referenced that boomers are leaving at a really high rate. But also, millennials and Gen Z have doubled down in terms of wanting to do purpose-driven work. So we linked it to our ERGs right away to say, on day one, from an affinity standpoint or allyship, which ERG is it that you're most interested in? And then what we do is someone from that ERG becomes a mentor for that person for their first year. so that all of the isms and the water cooler and helps them sort of figure out what it looks like. Because I think oftentimes our challenges, and I love what Sarah said, is so important. We often interview people for their genius, and then we onboard them for similarity. And so what we want to do is be able to pull the thread through and go, hey, that same genius of why we told you you'd be a phenomenal addition to Dollar General, we want to make sure we leverage that from day one.
Say that again. We interview them for their genius.
And then we onboard them for similarity. So it's
Wow.
all of the amazing
Very
things that
nice.
Sarah does at
Yes.
Boeing. We need all of that. And
Right.
then on day one is, now let me tell you how we do things.
Yes, time to conform.
No, it's interesting. We just hired someone who's a pretty high flyer, and one piece of advice to him was, whatever we hired you for you, please don't become a Novartian and lose that part of what you are. And so we want you to be part of this community, but we hired you for you, and don't lose that when you come into this company. Don't
Yeah.
let us suck that out of you, right? So.
No, you're absolutely right. To me, the genius is, how do we get folks to, when they first come in the door, yes, I want them to seek first to understand, but then there's a certain point where I want them to tap in and be what I call sufficiently disruptive,
Yeah.
right? Where they're bringing their genius to the table, and that's the reason why we hired you.
Wow, that's fantastic. This morning, we heard from Microsoft, and they talked about their D&I initiatives. And one of the points that Lindsay Ray made in her presentation was that we have lost the sameness of experience. Because we went away, right? We became virtual. We work remotely. What we were able to connect around the apparatus of that, the environment of that, the atmosphere of that is no longer present. And so as you all think about how you're connecting people to mission and purpose, how you're getting them to appreciate the D&I focus and activities that you're trying to do, how are you building a sameness of experience so we feel that connection to each other?
So I'll take this one. Dollar General has been around for 86 years, and our mission is serving others. But what we found in doing our work is linking to the mission of serving others also had this underlining of not being able to celebrate difference. And so we literally created a movement in the organization of my difference makes a difference. And what we did was a cultural competence assessment. And what we wanted to do was to be able to highlight that one of the amazing things that really makes work is being able to leverage the collective genius of everyone in the room. So we took cameras and we went and did a day in the life of into different homes, different employees. We did videos and made it a big deal. We created a web page that says my difference makes a difference. We then doubled down from the standpoint of behaviors. I'm a firm believer that the behaviors you reward are the behaviors that people will repeat. So even for our most senior leaders all the way down to our frontline leaders, we did everyday acts of inclusion. And then we created pins around them, created a contest with it, if you will, gamified it, so to speak, because everybody's competitive and nobody wants to be last on the leaderboard, right? And so we doubled down on that. And then that helped people to be free in terms of understanding what does it mean to bring my authentic self to the workplace.
Wow, that is fantastic. That's interesting. How about Novartis and Boeing? As you think about, I don't know to what percent of folks went virtual or went remote in the pandemic. I don't know if you've instituted a policy to bring folks back to create that sameness of experience. But how are you dealing with just connecting people back to their teams, to the mission, to the purpose in the remote area we live in today?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. We went a little extreme in the pandemic, and we rolled out a program we called Choice with Responsibility, where we said, you don't ask your manager, you tell your manager where you're going to work. We went too far, I can tell you that, because they forgot that last word, with responsibility. And so we, of course, have now pulled it back and are doing kind of the standard hybrid that most companies are doing with some limited exceptions, but with a pretty strong rubric around what we expect. And it's interesting because I think the example I love, I ran into someone just after we brought people back in the parking garage. And I'm like, how you doing? It's like, oh, bad day. Or like, everything and it was like 2:00. She was running to get her son because something happened at daycare. And I'm like, she's like, hybrid stuff is terrible. And a few expletives, I think, if I remember correctly. And I said, but how was your experience this morning? Well, here. Oh, that was fantastic. so it's this element of, I think it's really about now blending back the personal life that we've all tried to figure out, which we've been doing for years, but we gave people much more permission to do that with the experience of actually coming together. And so we try to call that out. We try, as everyone, to try to show the value of actually coming together. But we struggle, as everyone else does, but we're making steady progress along that journey. So.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh yeah, it's so complicated.
It is.
Boeing has 150,000 people around the world. We have never stopped building aircraft through the pandemic, right? So we've had people coming in every day since throughout. And when you have people coming in to build our products, there's a real sense of responsibility to those folks. We ought to be there too to support them. So we've had people coming in regularly. We've also had people hybrid regularly, and now we're trying to figure out the balance just like everyone else. I think what has kept our sameness throughout is that continued focus on mission and purpose. And I notice us talking about our values more than we ever did before. It often begins a meeting talking about the values, because at least if we can all ground in those values as our North Star, that connects us, right? And that brings us all closer to the mission.
That's a great point. As we heard this morning about those industries that allowed their workforce to go remote or virtual, I think we also have to acknowledge that in most, if not all, manufacturing environments, those folks came to work every day. And what I have seen and my team has seen is there's a little bit of a disparate feeling of, well, you got to go home and I was here every day, so how am I going to get mine, right? And that appreciation and bringing people back and the intentional gathering, I think, is so important. What experiences have you had, John A., at Dollar General with this idea? Because retail was the same, not just manufacturing.
No, you're absolutely right. On our supply chain side of the house, things never stopped. Obviously, with our stores, things never stopped. And in fact, we were one of the early adopters to dive in and be a part of the solution, if you will. Folks could come to their local Dollar General, which 75% of the United States is within a 5-mile radius of at least one of our stores. So we even doubled down in terms of if people wanted to get vaccinations, then we were a vaccine destination as well during the pandemic. But I think one of the things that we have to make sure that a watch out is, as we think about returning back to the workforce, is talent that has been able to successfully be able to work remotely. In some cases, we're seeing where folks are doubling down of, no, I'm not returning back to the workplace. I know of one particular retailer that put in a mandate for everyone to return back to the office. This person said, no, much has changed since the pandemic. I now adopted 2 children, and I'm a stay-at-home mom. And literally, within 3 days of them being let go, they were at a competitor. And so, I think that that's one of the cautions that we have to really think about. What are we doing? And that's the work that I like this morning from Etsy, and talking about how intentional are we. And really her call out of, what do you do when your top talent says, no,
Right.
I'm not coming back into the office 3 days a week, 2 days a week, I'm not. I'm happy with being able to see the kids get on the bus every morning, and I'm happy with being here when they get off the bus every day. And so, these are some of the things that I think that we have to really think through from a solution standpoint, and what's the impact on our culture and our talent.
Yep.
And John A., she made a good point also, because that resonated with me, is that those folks can get more work done at home in an hour that maybe someone else could get done in 10 hours of being physically in an office. And we have to acknowledge, what is the work product And are we specific in our ability to measure that so we could say, you know what, you've proven that you can deliver that and execute that, and therefore maybe there's an exception, or maybe we were too rigid in the policy as we originally conceived and conceptualized it. So I think that was a great, that resonated with me also.
We have a 3-word mantra, which is earn the commute.
Love it.
You've got to earn the commute, right? We don't go in just to go in. We go in with purpose, purposeful collaboration. If we're gonna have people come in, it's gotta matter.
Wow, that's a great comment. Earn the commute. Wow. Novartis, as y'all have looked at intentionally bringing people back, and how is that working? And any pushback, any challenges that you're finding?
Yeah, about a year and a half ago, we were trying not to have a hard policy, as people were still emerging out of working total remote work. But we were very intentional about get your teams together, talk about when your team should come in, what are those moments, how do you want to and big push, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. Like 3 months, 6 months, nobody was still coming in. So we said, all right, now we have to be much more purposeful. So we're, as many, we're like 12 days a month. You pick the 12 days. Ideally, your team should come in on a day, so you're together.
Right.
But what we've clearly found, and it depends country by country. We have some countries where we're at like 80% capacity, which is amazing. And we have others that are a bit harder. I think the U.S. is our hardest market, as many of our peers will acknowledge as well. But when people do come in, you have to create that sense of purpose for them coming in. I'm talking about office-based workers. Our lab folks are in and our manufacturing folks are in. But we're not coming together just to look at our laptop and be in a global meeting sitting at a cube.
Right.
You have to come in because your team is there for a purpose. And so we're trying to make the coming in to be very purposeful.
Yeah.
It's not about food trucks. It's not about extra food in the cafeteria. That helps, but it's really about the purpose of the team and why I see value in me coming in and hanging out with you, Shane, face to face for the day.
To earn the commute.
Yeah, you got it.
I mean, that's
Exactly.
perfect. Yeah. That's perfect. Yeah. Another theme that we can't leave without touching on was the idea of talent retention, talent attraction, recruiting and hiring. I think these were the top issues that people wrote in on. How are you all seeing your talent pipeline? And my first question is, do you have an intentional succession planning process that folks know I'm in it, I know what the steps are to work through it? Does that exist within your organization? So that's question one to be reflecting on. And then secondly, when you've lost good talent, because we all have, what is your process to reflect on that and be better next time? Right? Or how good are you all as organizations in discerning why do people want to stay, but more importantly, why are people leaving? Right? So let's take the first one. Any thoughts on how you're developing your folks, your succession planning process? Do you feel like you've got it right?
Well, I can go first. We all chuckled at that, probably suggesting that we haven't quite gotten it right yet, but we're all working on it. Your point about the journey, right? Because there's not a destination. The leadership programs I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation are part of it for us, right? We're highlighting the people we think are future CEOs, and we're giving them really intentional development. So that's one of the efforts. I don't think we have been transparent with people historically about where they sit in the talent matrix, right? Or one of you gave the example of, I had no idea I was on a succession plan for X, Y, and Z. We haven't been good about that. So we're trying to become more transparent, and it's a double-edged, right? Because the people who are on succession plans, you give them that message, they're elated, they have new sense of purpose. The people who aren't on a succession plan suddenly become deflated, even though they might be really great core contributors. So there is a balance there that we've got to navigate and figure out. But I think that the mark of a successful succession strategy is that we can replace every leader from within, right? We should be able to replace we should have a slate of people ready to replace every single one of our senior leadership positions. And I don't know about you two.
It's aspiration.
It's a great aspiration.
Define slate, Sarah.
Yeah.
We of course work on that as well. Certainly for all of our executive committee, EVRs and BVRs, to have robust succession plans that are well represented, that we're as a matter of really getting people ready to move to that role. Now the question is, how well do you act on that, or do you put it on the shelf and you dust it off when someone leaves and go, oh, maybe those 3 people. No, maybe not. Like that's not a real succession plan. So I've really been trying to push that these are real succession plans with real values, and we're challenging our business leaders, like, don't put these 3 names down unless you're actually developing those people for
Right.
that role with great intentionality. Now, I say we're more on the early end of that journey than the late end, but some of the things we're doing around the programs I mentioned earlier, around what we call My Potential, is really about a very deep dive for folks on those succession plans to learn more about themselves and where their talents may best be fit in the organization. And so, but it's a lot of work, it's a lot of journey, it's a lot of people, but it's something that is worth the investment.
Well, like we said at the beginning, 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. I think too often succession planning is a transactional activity that creates a dusty artifact pretty quickly if we're not truly having those conversations. And what we teach is I should be able to walk to any leader and say, who are the 2 people behind you?
Absolutely.
And do they know? I mean, that's even a more fundamental question. Do they even know they're the 2 people behind you? And then if I go to those 2 people, what has been done to help you develop? Those questions quickly see, is it a dusty artifact, a transactional activity, or really a transformational conversation? Dollar General, how are you all doing succession planning?
Probably at the same place that both my colleagues are today with me. We establish a lot of rigor around it. We're linking development to it. And then I think for us, from an inclusion standpoint, we look at inclusion both behavioral and structural. And succession planning is a part of the structural things that we're putting in place and adding rigor around it to really just say what you said, Sarah. Do folks know how to navigate the organization? Do they know what's being said about them when they're not in the room? Are they really, really clear on how I'm being developed? Because to your point, not everyone is going to be a successor. But at the same time, we should be able to increase everyone's go-to performance, knowing that everyone won't be a go-to performer, right? And so it's how do we raise the level within the organization and what that looks like. And so there is all of the structure that you have of 9-box and development, but then there is, in our inclusion learning journey, there is for director and above, we do work like it starts with a conversation and being intentional about, are you having ongoing development conversations? We feel like succession planning shouldn't be something that pops up and leaders are scrambling. You should always have your finger on the pulse of talent in your organization. And at any given time, what's the organization's commitment to that person? What's that person's ownership in their own work? And then what is your work as a leader in setting them up for success? And then do they know what the anticipated arrival date is? And then you reverse engineer back from there, right? Knowing that promotion is never promised, but potential should never be something that we aren't developing.
And I think that's the stumbling block for many organizations because they fear putting the names on the backup that promotion is promised.
Yeah.
And I think that's holds us back unnecessarily because how inspiring it is if I know I'm being identified as a person who could step into that role, right? Not a promise, right? But a promise of my potential. And then it's on me to help get there. Exactly. So that's a great point.
Go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to build on that and say, and it's also important for leaders, you have to have a level of rigor that holds folks accountable, right? Because if not, particularly in the retail sector, what you'll often see is Sarah here exceeds expectations all the time. But Rob is my successor, and he meets expectation,
right.
and no one is holding the leader accountable. Well, hold on, say more. So if every year Sarah's exceeding expectation and Rob is meeting, then why isn't Sarah being developed from a successor standpoint?
Right.
And so
that's a really good point.
If you don't have that measure of rigor to hold folks accountable, then it's kind of all done up under the guise of I should be able to run my business.
We asked during the talent review this year, the senior talent, I asked 3 simple questions. I said, they came with all their stacks and slides and their talent cards and the plans. 3 questions. Who's thriving? who do we need to help a little bit, and who is wrong role, wrong time. How can we help them find something else? And those three questions filled up the entire series of discussions, and then all of those other things actually came up. I was trying to distill it down to something like, who's thriving? Like, let's talk about those people, and who do we help? How can we help them? But then I made it concrete, like, what are you going to do to help them? Is it a different role? Is it a leadership challenge? Is it whatever? And really to try to keep it at a super simple level.
I love that simplicity of that. Three things, and all of them are constructive, right? You're not putting anyone in a judgment box. It's all about how do we help people thrive. That's the ultimate. Yeah, I love that.
How about on the retention side? So I mentioned the second part of that question was when you lose a high potential, high performing person, how have you all responded to that in your respective enterprises? Is there intentional reflection? Do you do a post-mortem to say, what could we have done differently? Because people in this economy that we're in today, they do have choices. And if I don't like the culture, as you talked about, Rob, or I don't feel like I've been identified as for my potential to grow into a different role, as I think you said, John A., they'll find a job quite quickly if there's high performers will. And so how do we make sure they don't leave? Can you all speak a bit to that, what you've done in your organizations or what you're trying to do in your organizations to keep your top talent? But if you lose your top talent, how well are we at doing that after action review of why they left?
Embrace the boomerang, I would say. So we have people who spend 50 years working at our company. We are a heritage company, but we do have people who leave. We embrace the possibility that they go do something else for a while and realize they want to come back home to Boeing. And so we actually have little networks set up to reach out to those folks, keep them warm, let them know about other opportunities that might come up at the company should they choose to return. And that's successful. We're also doing a lot more in the listening space, reaching out to people when they have decided to leave, after they have left, what made you leave, what could have prevented you from leaving, those sorts of things. And like we talked about earlier, to me, it always comes down to three things. It's opportunity, right? People will leave if they don't see themselves having opportunity. It is purpose. Am I doing meaningful work? Am I making a difference? And connection. Do I like the people I'm working with? Do they care about me? And if we have those three things, that's pretty much all you can ask for. If we're failing at any of them, we're at risk. So I think continue to focus on those three things and continue to keep the network warm.
Say those three things again, Sarah. I like that.
Opportunity, purpose, and connection.
That's interesting, the boomerang philosophy, because old school would say, well, you left, right? So, you're dead to us, right?
Come on back anytime.
But this effect, because I think you're right, particularly in legacy, iconic organizations, you may have folks, I'm thinking of several of our clients, who spent maybe their parents. I mean, these are generational folks, and to leave is a significant life event, maybe thinking the grass is greener somewhere else. But recognizing, because we know, and we've been around in other places, you all have, that they may want to come back, and not burning those bridges and creating an environment to say, hey, listen, go try this, experiment. We heard a lot today about curiosity, right? Go be curious, but recognize you're valuable here, and we would love to continue that conversation. I think that's a great point.
Exactly.
We also very much embrace the boomerang, especially in our industry, which is relatively small. Yours is even smaller. One of the things we're going to launch in 2024 is an alumni network. So almost like an academic approach where we're going to get folks together in a geographic region once a year and come and talk about something really interesting that's non-proprietary to keep them close to the company and look and feel. It's a work in progress, but it's something that my team and I have committed to try to launch for 2024 to keep people close. It'll be invitation only. I'll just be clear, that's right. But to try to keep people close to, as you said, anticipate the boomerang. Maybe. So,
That's fantastic. A couple of just other thoughts. Sarah and John A., you all lead for Boeing and for Dollar General the D&I initiative, which is certainly no small task. If I could just ask you to reflect on what you would say is the biggest learning or biggest opportunity that's on your plate today as you look to 2024 to continue the momentum you've started, to build on maybe gaps that you've discovered. What have you learned in leading that for two very significant companies?
Well, I will take a stab at it. It is It is the most challenging work I have done in my career, and I've done other things. It is also the most rewarding work I have ever done in my career. For me, I don't know about you, but D&I teams tend to be small. They tend to not be embedded everywhere. And so for us to be successful, we really have to expand our reach. You talked about ambassadors for inclusion earlier. We have to have ambassadors embedded everywhere. We have to have catalysts that are thriving in all parts of our business. We have to empower people and share that, share the spark. So one of the things we're really working on as we head into 2024 is expanding the reach, empowering and equipping anyone who wants to be part of our inclusion journey to be part of it, and recognizing them for that effort. That's a very, high level kind of simple view of it, but I think it's so important because the work, and we know we have not come as far as we need to from a diversity standpoint, period, anywhere. The work has been done by the minority for a really long time. It's time for the work to be done by the majority, for everyone. The work is for everyone and by everyone.
Wow, that's a great point. And I think that's so true. Done by the minority, for the minority, and changing that mindset.
Yeah.
Great point. John A., what have you all learned at Dollar General?
Well, just building on exactly what Sarah said, for us, I told leaders from day one when I walked into the door that I'm actually not here to lead the D&I efforts. I'm not. I'm here to work with all of them as leaders, and we will lead the D&I efforts. We'll all share in the risk, we will all share in the work, and we will all share in the reward. So we are measuring where we are, because what gets measured is what matters, and what gets measured is what gets done. But then we're being really intentional about building on the next steps, if you will, in our journey, in our inclusion journey. And part of what I mean by measuring where we are is we took the approach, starting with our board, that every leader had to take an inclusive leader assessment. Because I think all too often what happens is, as practitioners, we kind of come in and think, well, it's like, quote unquote, to your point, the majority, minority, and the minority doing the work for the minority is like the right thing to do. So before I start asking leaders to be a part of the inclusive leader learning journey, people need to know, where am I at personally on the journey myself? And so each leader was able to take a reflective view through an inclusive leader assessment, which we then do every other year. And then we do aggregate reports where we break that out by business unit, by function, so that you can just see, here's where my function is in terms of where we are on the journey and the wood that we have to chop to get better.
That's fantastic. Yeah, wow. Anything happening over at Novartis in this space that you're proud of?
Yeah, I mean, we're really trying to move from activities to impact. I think it's very easy for folks that are leading D&I or folks that are in the D&I organization to sponsor lots of activities. We're trying to make that to be much more impactful. What are you doing to drive impact in the organization? Leadership awareness, leadership responsibility, different hiring paradigms, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're very much more focused on transitioning that. And it's been a very interesting journey to change that mindset that this is not an organization that raises flags. This is an organization that has an impact on the business and the people, and creating an environment that is inclusive and where everyone feels safe and to be their best self when they come to work every day. So that's what the journey we're really focusing on right now.
That's fantastic. I would love to ask each of you what gets you up each morning to come to Boeing, to come to Dollar General, to come to Novartis. What gets you up in the morning?
Well, my BHAG is very simple. I aspire to inspire and transform the lives of 10 million people over the next 10 years through my work. And the meter is running. And so Dollar General I wake up every morning and my feet hit the floor, and I'm super excited about the day ahead and the work that we have to do. And then at night, my head hits the pillow exhausted from the possibilities of what got done, what didn't get done. But it's very, very simple for me. This is all purpose-driven work, and I don't have to do this. I get to do this.
What a great mindset.
That's a mic drop moment.
Yeah, I know, exactly. We might want to end the roundtable right there,
Yeah.
John A., right? Sarah, what gets you up in the morning at Boeing?
Well, I told someone this recently, actually, that I wake up every day knowing that I and my team will make a difference that day. There aren't a lot of jobs that you can say that about. And that is a really, really powerful thing. And if not us, then who's going to do it? So that's super inspiring to me. There are a lot of people that rely on the work that we do, the really important work that we do, and it is about service to them and service to the broader mission.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Rob?
And as a healthcare company, I agree with your last sentiment. I mean, I'm privileged to have this job and to come to work every single day. And our vision our mission as a company is to extend and improve human life. So to get a drug approved or a new medicine that literally can cure cancer, or to cure a childhood disease, or to have someone be around another 6 months, or to take away an immunologic condition that is debilitating and literally make it disappear, is incredibly motivating. And then the joy is that I get to do it together with all of my colleagues, who I care very deeply about. So I had started my journey in the professional world at Novartis. I left for a while. And I got a phone call, did you want to come back? And it was a half a second answer of, yes, I want to come back, because of the people and the science and the impact that we can make. And I totally share your vision. I do get out of bed every day and I smile in the morning. I put my feet on the ground. I'm like, all right, we're going to go do this and have fun every day. And for me, it is very much about doing it together. I'm a big, and always have been, a very big team person. And I create and get lots of energy from those around me, and helps me drive my own purpose and mission.
That's fantastic. One theme that we're hearing more and more about in the HR space, while we talk about employee wellness, we often think about the physical body. But one thing we read about, we hear about, there was a recent article in Harvard Business Review about the power of investing in our employees' mental health and the importance of that. From my standpoint, certainly COVID drove a lot of stress, a lot of challenges. I think that impacted that. I think we could look even holistically about social media and just all the things in life that are facing our employee wellness perspective that maybe didn't even exist 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but are driving factors to the total employee's presence when they arrive at our workspace. So not just looking at physical health, but mental health. Have you all done anything, or do you have any comments on how your organizations value that and appreciate that?
Okay. Yeah,
Go ahead,
I'll do a quick start. We actually just did a whole review of all of our, because we hear the same thing, obviously, from our employees, but we also read externally. And we just did a review of all of our mental health and well-being offerings and realized that we were doing a lot that had no impact. And so we're in the process of kind of focusing down to those things that have the greatest impact on the largest number of people, and so that we can focus our and do them really, really well. And the next challenge that I've had with my team is to actually translate those and put them into the flow of work. Because there are several surveys and books of data that says when it's out there for people to get, not many people go out and get it. It's like 10, 12% or something like that. Don't quote me on the number, but it's low. If you put it in the flow of work, you get a pop-up on Teams, or you get a pop-up during your course of day saying, hey, you've had 7 meetings back-to-back in a row, Rob. Take a 10-minute break or something. Or access this, cool. whatever. Yeah. Then the response rate, or the accession rate, is like in above 50, 60%. So we're trying to focus on those things that matter. And then is there a way to put them more into the flow of work so people actually use them and they don't have to go seek them?
Yeah, that's a great point.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think it's an interesting way to look towards it.
It's to your point about you've been in 7 meetings. My car has this feature that if you're driving
Yes,
too
exactly.
long,
Wake
right,
up. Say,
it'll
wake
hey,
up.
it might be time for a break with a little coffee cup.
And you just keep driving.
Yeah, we oftentimes we do. We're like, I got to get there, right? But I think what a great mental trigger to say, am I where I need to be mentally, right? Based on that trigger. That's a great one. How about you?
So it's that, and we even try to add a bit of fun to it. If we're going to have day-long town halls, we actually have moments where we stop and have dance parties, and it's a minute. Everybody has to stand up and dance, and all of those type of things. But then it's the other things of really equipping our leaders to be able to, especially right now, is so tough. And for the work that Sarah and I do, you know, there's all of the different SCOTUS rulings, and there's all of the different, at any given moment, you know, we just recently had a tragedy in one of our stores of a racially motivated shooting, and that impacts everybody's wellness. And so it's being able to equip leaders to know how to skillfully check in on your people and just ask the basic questions. Are you okay? Is everything all right? Because for us, what we have found to be most important is not losing the people component of the work. And when we do that, again, going back to the filter of nothing about me without me. So asking people, what is it that you need more of? So that they know that they're not another spoke in the wheel or another widget along business metrics that we're trying to accomplish, but we really do authentically care about them. And then the last thing I'll say that has been very big for us is social mobility. We have been so intentional about Dollar General is one of the last places where you don't have to have formal education and you can find yourself with having a very successful career. We have officers that run billion-dollar categories that don't have any formal education, if you will. But what we have offered is 100% tuition reimbursement, and we talk about it because, to your point, if you just say, oh, it's over there, it's the EAP, and then you find like 2% of the people actually tap into it. But if we're starting with the conversation of what is it that you'd like to be when you grow up, and setting people free to say, it's okay if that's not being at Dollar General in your future. So we do 100% tuition reimbursement with no guidelines around what you want to major in, and no criteria that you have to work for the company a specific amount of time. Asking people who may be on our retail side of the house, what would you like to do differently? And so we've had many folks, in a short amount of time, we have the third largest private fleet behind only Walmart and Kroger. And we built that by literally saying to people, if you have no aspirations of going to college, but you'd love to have a career in logistics, we'll pay for you to get your CDLs, and then we'll put you in a truck, and you'll start off with a salary somewhere between $75,000 to $96,000 a year, and you can drive across America and get to see the world, you know. And so it's those type of things from a wellness standpoint that have rang true the most. And then the last thing I'll say is our ERGs. Really, really important from a wellness standpoint. We go to them in crisis situations and not only check in on them, but leverage them as well to be the resources that reach out to sort of our general population, if you will, in terms of 170,000 employees, and how do we touch people and let them know that you matter and we care.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. And your very first point about just teaching leaders how to check in with their people, right? Because so much of us grew up in a generation that, hey, you're at work, you just suck it up, right? I mean, we just can't operate in that mindset going forward for all these reasons. So I think that's a great message. Sarah?
Yeah, well, I just want to tag on to that, and I think we have become afraid to ask the question because we don't know how to answer it adequately, right? So we just don't even want to step into that fray, but it's so important to, even if we don't know the answer, because asking and demonstrating that curiosity is a demonstration of care. For me, I have 2 points. One is, this is a bad news, good news story, right? The bad news is mental health and wellness are at an all-time low in our country. That's the bad news. The good news is we're talking about it in companies, in places where we never talked about it before, right? That is reason to hope. We're putting it on the table. We're putting benefits in place to support people, whatever their situation. That's really meaningful. So I think I feel more hopeful about it than I do pessimistic. The other thing is, serendipitously, I had the opportunity to hear from Professor Seligman, who's done decades of research on happiness and well-being in the workplace. This was just a couple weeks ago, and one of the findings that really struck me was the number one predictor of future performance is well-being. The number one predictor of sustained future performance is well-being. Not your education, not your experience, not who mentors you, but it's your well-being. And the well-being is, unfortunately 50% of it is sort of biological, but the other 50% we can influence. And it is, that's just like, kind of a mind-blowing thing for us to consider as employers who want to do right by our employees and have them deliver their best. We can influence that other 50% through things like what you talked about, Jenna, and what you talked about, Rob, giving them those opportunities to grow, giving them opportunities to learn, having the conversations about where they are in the succession plan. It's all of that stuff that really influences the well-being, the optimism, the positive affect, all of those things that then lead to future sustained performance success. So I just thought that was really cool and so empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. Well-being, right?
Right.
Well-being. As we reflect on the summit, I speak at a number of these events with executive platforms, be it the pharmaceutical event or the manufacturing event. But this event, I think, is particularly important because in the title, it's about humans. And at the end of the day, we can spend a lot of time talking about AI and manufacturing and equipment and technologies and modernization. But at the end of the day, it's about our people, and it's about the humans that we are able to take care of and to shepherd and to mentor and to guide. And I just want to say I very much appreciate the time that we've been able to spend together this morning. Each of you are doing such fantastic work at your organizations, and I'm smarter as a result of our time together this morning. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Shane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to another episode of Executive Platform's Blueprint podcast series. Let's do it again soon.